Well, you all know that we have disasters in Queensland. I suppose traditionally what I should show is pictures of floods and cyclones and that sort of thing. But quite frankly, if you live here, you'll know the reality better than that. The fact is, we live in the most disaster-affected state in Australia. Now, in Queensland, we're all quite good at coming together to deal with disasters. In Brisbane, in 2011, the Mud Army brought 25,000 from our community, people like us, together to help with the clean-up after the floods. We see the SES, the Royal Fire Service, volunteer groups, the Uniformed Emergency Services, all contributing to response, and a whole range more people pulling together the effort, the information, the coordination needed to deal with the recovery, which lasts for years. And then again, we all, families, communities, businesses, not-for-profits, voluntary groups, contribute and continue to get ready for that next summer, which always comes round every year. So in Queensland, we've got a practice system to bring all this stuff together. Federal, state, local governments make up the backbone of the system. It's called the Disaster Management Arrangements here. But it reaches much further than just government in what it touches, and much wider to deal with the hazards that we face. And this is a big state. There's a whole range of communities and local governments across the area that we cover. And disasters happen, thankfully, to those communities, and not that often, and not to everybody at once. And so when they do, reports are written for sure, but they're not the only thing that happens in the world. Our attention moves on, and people change. And then somewhere, at some time, something like that event happens again to someone else. And so we've got this vast sea of data out there of what we've done, of how we do it, of what we learned, how we could do it better. You can see some of the reports there, the Queensland Flood Commission of Inquiry, the Pacific Adventurer, that was that oil spill on Bribie Island, dam warnings and the way that dam operators get messages to communities. So how do we learn from our own history? Let me tell you a story that really emphasised the importance of this. You remember Cyclone Debbie? This was last year, across the coast, big effect on the Whitsundays. Well, 2 weeks before that cyclone crossed the coast, we finished a series of workshops where we looked at the evacuation arrangements in the state. And we asked all those people who worked in this sector two questions: what works well and what are the biggest risks? And the sector came up in that second question with a range of risks that they knew, well, this is a potential problem. And then what we saw in places during the evacuations from Cyclone Debbie, those risks became reality. And it takes just one tourist standing in an airline queue for hours and hours and hours to tweet something like "Queensland experience terrible, the worst organisation possible." And that sentiment was clearly out there. And if that happens, then our economy gets affected and nudged downwards a little bit. And so this whole programme really is, how do we get that communal knowledge, the stuff that we know already, available, those hard-won lessons, to the next person who's going to be potentially in charge of looking after your safety in the next event. Well, we've got a system now. We've got a network of people who are involved in this sort of thing. We talk, we debrief, we meet, we discuss these things. But we think there's a better way, there must be a better way to share that information we know out there. And we also think that you guys will know what it is. And so I guess the heart of this problem is that idea of a disaster deep dive into the data we've already got and will collect in the future. We want to be able to contribute to it, to identify and prioritise the lessons. We want to capture ideas from new experiences, and we want to make those lessons and opportunities available to those who will need it in the most convenient way possible for the next event. So essentially what we're asking you to do is to help us improve the safety of all of us in Queensland for disasters that come in the future. That's my pitch.
Thanks, Mike. Just get the mic over there.
Hi there. Are you planning, I don't know this is just problem statement, but because you have volunteer groups amongst other community members, are you looking for integrating with those current disaster management branch solutions, or are you wanting to have something like an app that people can access publicly and then they add? Like, are you wanting layers for the different stakeholders that you have available as well as the public, or...?
Look, the community is involved in all in disasters, certainly. I think what we try to do is to corral information about how we can do things better through the normal channels. As a community, if you're part of a community, you can reach out somewhere to some group that's connected to the system, and they're the place that is really what we're aiming at. The people who work on this business permanently.
Yeah, the SES
lessons,
and volunteers.
SES and local governments and people like Ergon Energy and Telstra and actually Coles and Woolies. We talk to them in disasters. So the impact of these lessons needs to make sense in those areas, even though they may not be directly involved in the system itself.
And are you wanting to connect to the current disaster management branch database, or are you wanting to start storing that somewhere else to ensure classification?
Well, when we talk about a database, that picture of reports I had up earlier on really encompasses the lessons we know. I think we've got something like 200 recommendations about how we can improve various bits of the system. So that's our starting base of data, and it isn't in a database at the moment. It's in reports and reviews, a lot of which are publicly available. But what we want to do is to tap into that sort of stuff, make it more structured and get it delivered to the people who actually need it when they need it.
Okay, thank you.
What business intelligence software is currently being used to house this data, and what level of analytics has been done through that business intelligence software?
We don't have I don't know of any specific business intelligence software that does that. And in answer to what's being done, not enough. That's why we're here.
Any questions? Anything online? Going? No more questions? Thanks, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you very much.